National Labor Relations Board will begin weighing whether or not McDonald's is a joint employer with its franchise locations. The case is the result of 19 formal consolidated complaints across franchise McDonald's locations made by workers claiming that they were retaliated against for pro-labor activities. A ruling that McDonald's is a joint employer would mean that corporate McDonald's could be held responsible for working conditions, pay, and workers' rights violations at its franchise locations. McDonald's disagrees with the joint employer notion, and it says it provides access to resources to its 3,100 franchisees in the U.S., but this does not support a joint employer relationship under the law. Now, the International Franchise Association has spoken out on the ruling as well, saying that it will stifle job growth within the industry. And experts say the customer experience in-store would likely remain the same if that ruling is upheld. A formal decision from the NLRB could come in 2016 or even later, and some experts say appeals could go as high as the Supreme Court. Back over to you guys.
Wow, Kate, thank you. Let's talk more about what is at stake here and what this might mean not only for fast food franchises, but other staffing and outsourcing firms.
Yeah, joining us right now, Paul Millus is employment attorney of counsel to Meyer, Swazi, English, and Klein. This is a big deal, isn't it?
It's a huge deal. It has titanic implications for employment in areas where many people are employed. We're talking about millions of people are in the fast food industry. Take staffing as well, take part-time work and seasonal, and you've got a situation where it could be devastating.
But explain what exactly, so we know these are big industries that employ a lot of people, but how common are the specific practices at the heart of the claim here?
Well, look, McDonald's is clearly the king of the hill. They're the ones who control their product. That's why they're the most successful in terms of franchises. But there are plenty others who do the same thing. And they subject their franchisees to the same sorts of controls that McDonald's does. Maybe a little bit different, maybe not as much at times, but in the end, there's a lot of control going on because that's what the customer wants. They want a product that they know they can depend on.
Let's say they lose. Let's say McDonald's loses and they are found to be a joint employer with all of their franchisees.
We're talking at the end of the day after everything else.
What happens then? I mean, how would that change? What do you think McDonald's would do about that?
It's a sea change. Well, they can't do much if you're talking about after all appeals are gone. It's a sea change. What it means is that McDonald's will be treated as the employer of every franchise employee across the country. And what that'll do is it'll open them up to liability in terms of representation elections. They'll have to bargain with those employees on a wholesale basis on unfair labor practice charges, and even as far as discrimination lawsuits, because they'd be deemed an employer.
Would it affect things like minimum wage?
It would affect everything because everything would be on the table. Now, minimum wage is set by state governments and so forth. But in terms of how they negotiate, they would have to negotiate directly with employees of the franchisees that they never had to do before.
So I'm thinking the cost of a franchise is going to go up because McDonald's is going to want a little more something. If they're going to be held liable. What about their controls over labor practices of the franchisees? They're going to have a bigger say in all of this, won't they?
Look, if they have to pay the freight in terms of to employees and labor and employment issues, then they're going to ask for more levels of control. But how could you dictate that control from Illinois over all of the franchises across the country? It'd be a massive, massive effort and will really cost a fortune and change the lives of these employees as well. Because now it's a totally different situation.
And you're saying this isn't just specific to the fast food industry. To take an example relative to us, cafeteria workers who work for Sodexo could make a complaint and NBC Universal would be held responsible. So any corporation that operates with this kind of model, even if it doesn't consider itself to be in the same business, could be affected here.
If you take it to the end of the spectrum, you're looking for elements of control. What used to be an issue was, do you control wages? Do you control hours? If you do, you're an employer. If you don't, you are not. But if you look at elements of control, like in the situation just asked, if someone says, who works at CNBC, I want this person to work at this hour as opposed to that hour. That's when we have the most employees in here. Are they then directing the hours of the employees, impacting their wages? So you look at all these factors, and what the unions are interested in doing is chalking them up one by one to establish that level of control.
Okay, handicap it. Which way do you think it's going to go when all is said and done?
Oh, I think there's no question that this particular board will rule that they are a joint employer in this case and in a case called Browning-Ferris, which is another matter as well.
But then it goes to appeals.
Then it goes to appeals, and those will be long-running appeals.
And what happens if the political climate changes, if this particular board that you cited, if the makeup of it changes?
Well, look, the board tries to operate on a principle which we know in the law is stare decisis. They try to look at other cases and basically give people guidance on how they're going to act in the future. This, some may say, is a sea change. Others will say it's only an extension of what we've always been arguing over time. The fact is, if it goes to the court's going to make that determination whether there's a change in administration or not.
I suspect you'll be back. We'll be talking about this again in the future, don't you think?
Let me know.
Attorney Paul Millus joining us today. Thanks, Paul.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.